There is a special kind of dread that doesn't show up as screaming panic. It shows up as a quiet sentence in your head, especially around Christmas, when the year is almost over. What if next year is just another failure year? Not just a hard year, not just a complicated year, another year where you look back and feel the same heavy mix of shame, disappointment, and exhaustion you're feeling now. Another year where you promised yourself you'd change, and you didn't. Another year where you said, this time will be different, and it wasn't. Another year where December arrives and you think, I have nothing real to show for it. You don't talk about this openly at Christmas. You smile, you nod, you say the usual phrases. Next year will be my year. New year, new start. This time, I'm serious. But under the lights and the music and the decorations, there's a fear that tastes like truth. I've said this before. I've meant this before. And I still ended up here. You look at your life like a calendar laid out on the table. All the blank spaces where things were supposed to happen. All the boxes where you said, start diet, begin project, fix finances, stop this habit, talk to them. And most of them never became anything more than ink. You remember how January felt last time. You had ideas, plans, maybe even a system, a notebook, an app. You felt a little fire in your chest. You thought, this is the year I finally get it together. Then you hit February, March, real life. Old habits came back. Old fears came back. Old distractions came back. You lost momentum. You felt tired. You missed a few days. And then the voice showed up. See, here we go again. You're doing it again. You're failing again. Once that voice arrives, it doesn't just describe what's happening. It pushes you. Why bother? You'll just quit. You always mess it up eventually. You had your chance and you wasted it. So you stop trying. And then, months later, you hate yourself for stopping. That loop is what you're really afraid of this Christmas. Not the future in general, not the date on the calendar. You're afraid of living the same year again, with slightly different wrapping paper. Sometimes you try to motivate yourself with fear. This is it. If I fail again, I'm done. If I don't change this year, I never will. If I don't fix this now, my life is over. You think that if you scare yourself enough, you'll obey. But all you really do is raise the stakes so high that any slip feels like proof you're hopeless. Psychologically, your brain learns from experience, not slogans. And your experience has been this. You set huge goals. You throw yourself at them in a burst. You burn out. You drop everything. You feel like a failure. You repeat. That pattern becomes your evidence. So when you stand in late December, looking at the year behind you, your brain pulls out the file marked proof you'll mess it up again. The diet you quit after 2 weeks. The gym membership you used for a month and then avoided. The project you started excited and abandoned quietly. The plan to save money that turned into more debt. The promise to stop contacting them that collapsed the moment loneliness hit. You label the entire year with one word. Failure. And then you try to use that word as fuel, as if bullying yourself will somehow lead to a gentler future. I can't have another failure year. Underneath that statement is a deeper, more frightening one. I don't believe I can survive many more years like this. Not because of the calendar, because of what this does to your self-respect. Every time you make a promise to yourself and break it, you trust yourself less. Every time you say this time is different and prove yourself wrong, you believe yourself less. Every time you imagine a different life and end up in the same place, you value yourself less. So, when Christmas comes, when people talk about resolutions and goals and new beginnings, you just feel hopeful. You feel exposed. You feel the weight of all the past Decembers where you said the same things. You feel like a person who's constantly rewrapping the same empty box. There's also comparison. You look around and see other people's year in review. Career moves, weight loss, new relationships, new businesses, progress. They talk about how proud they are of themselves. They post their highlight reels. They say, I worked hard and it paid off. You look at your own year and see what you didn't finish, what you didn't start, what you broke, what you lost, what stayed exactly the same even though you were desperate for change. Your brain does something cruel. It takes your entire, complicated, painful year and summarizes it like this. You wasted it. It doesn't look at the invisible effort it took to just keep going when you wanted to give up. It doesn't count the days you fought battles no one saw. It doesn't see the times you held yourself together so you wouldn't explode on other people. It doesn't count surviving as anything. So you stand in the glow of Christmas decorations, thinking, I'm scared. I'm scared I will drag the same version of me into another year and nothing will really change. There is another layer under that fear. It's not just I'm afraid I will fail again. It's, if I fail again, what will I still believe about myself? Maybe you're already telling yourself things like, I'm too old to change. I missed my chance. I'm not disciplined enough. I'm just lazy. I'm broken. I'm not like these other people who can just decide and do it. When you say another failure year, you don't just mean another year where my goals don't work out. You mean another year that proves these sentences about me are true. That's why it hurts. Because every day you don't change becomes, in your mind, more evidence against you. You're also tired of pep talks that fade after one enthusiastic week, tired of this is your sign posts that don't actually help you when you're exhausted and scared, tired of people who say just do it, as if you hadn't tried doing it. So part of you is tempted to protect yourself by giving up early. If you don't expect anything from next year, it can't disappoint you. If you don't set goals, you can't fail them. If you don't try, you can't collapse. That's one way to handle the fear, but there's another, just as dangerous, trying to outrun it with unrealistic promises. This year, I will fix everything. I'll lose all the weight, fix the money, repair the relationship, change my personality, find my purpose, and never mess up again. You write lists. You watch motivation videos. You plan an entire new personality for January 1st, but that January 1st version of you is still you, with the same nervous system, the same habits, the same emotional wounds, the same fears, the same tendency to freeze when the task feels too big. Calling it a new year doesn't magically download new wiring into your brain. So what do you do sitting here in December, afraid of repeating yourself? Start with something simple and harsh. The year was not a failure. You are not a year. You lived 12 months with a particular mix of circumstances, strengths, weaknesses, trauma, fatigue, obligations, losses, fears, and tiny victories. Was it the year you wanted? Probably not. Was it the year you imagined when you said, this one will be different? Almost certainly not. But labeling the entire thing failure is lazy and cruel. Because when you call the whole year a failure, you erase all nuance. You erase the days you didn't give up on yourself. You erase the moments you tried, even if it didn't stick. You erase the nights you lay awake planning a better version of your life, which is still more effort than pure resignation. You erase the ways you showed up for other people even when you didn't believe in yourself. Failure is not, didn't become perfect. Failure is stopped learning anything. You have been learning, painfully, slowly, often the hard way, but learning about what doesn't work, about what triggers you, about the situations where you fall apart fastest, about the lies you tell yourself to escape, about the fantasies you cling to instead of taking one small, real step. The fear of another failure year is real. It's your nervous system saying, I can't go through another 12 months of promising myself the world and then watching it crumble. So don't promise yourself the world. Promise yourself something smaller and more honest. Not next year I will be a completely different person. More like, next year I will stop lying to myself about what I can do overnight. Not, next year will be the year I fix everything. More like, next year I will aim to fix one pattern at a time, slowly. Your fear is partly a response to how you've treated yourself up to now. You've used pressure instead of patience, harshness instead of understanding, big declarations instead of small commitments, fantasy instead of structure. Of course you're scared to do that again. Of course your body recoils at this year will be massive. It remembers. So this Christmas, instead of trying to override that fear with more dramatic promises, you could sit with it. Really sit with it. I am afraid that nothing will change. I am afraid of disappointing myself again. I am afraid of wasting more time. I am afraid of dying one day having never become who I wanted to be. You don't argue with that. You write it down if you can. You look it in the eye. You admit that this is the truth under all the glittering new year, new me noise. Then you ask a quieter question. Given that I feel this way, what kind of year could I actually handle? Not the ideal year, not the fantasy year, the survivable year, the real one. Maybe it looks like not changing everything, just stopping one self-destructive habit from getting worse. Not finishing the big dream, just consistently worrying in tiny blocks instead of only dreaming and then crashing. Not becoming your final form, just learning how to not abandon yourself every time you slip. When you fear another failure year, what you really fear is another year of cruelty toward yourself. Another year of talking to yourself like an enemy. Another year of only respecting success and treating all struggle as shameful. Another year of ignoring the fact that you are actually a human being with limits and wounds. You could choose a different experiment. What happens if next year I treat myself like someone I'm responsible for, not someone I'm punishing? That doesn't mean making excuses. It means understanding why you failed before, not as a moral judgment. As a pattern, you didn't fail because you're worthless. You failed because you tried to carry more than your current strength allows. You failed because the goals were bigger than your nervous system could tolerate. You failed because you had no safety net, no structure for bad days, only plans for perfect ones. You failed because you went all or nothing, and life always dragged you back to nothing. Next year can still contain failure. You will mess up. You will break promises. You will start things and drop them. You will have weeks where you fall back into old coping mechanisms. Another year of failure? Inevitable. Another year defined only by failure? That's the part you can influence. You could decide that next year you won't use failure as proof you're doomed. You'll use it as data. This didn't work. Why? Was the goal too big? Was I exhausted? Was I doing this to impress someone instead of because I care? Was I ignoring the fact that my mental health is already in pieces? If you treat every stumble as confirmation that you're hopeless, you will be terrified of trying. If you treat every stumble as information, unpleasant, annoying, embarrassing, but still information, you can adjust. It's not inspiring. It's not glamorous. It's real. The fear of another failure year will not vanish overnight. It will sit with you at midnight on New Year's Eve. It will sit with you the first week of January. It will whisper every time you try something. You've done this before. You know where this ends. You cannot silence that voice by shouting over it. You counter it with evidence. Small, boring evidence. I didn't do the whole workout, but I did 10 minutes instead of 0. I didn't fix the whole situation, but I sent the email I've been avoiding. I didn't transform my life, but I didn't abandon myself this week just because I was tired. You are afraid of another year where December you looks back and can only see failure. So you create moments for December you to see that aren't spectacular, but are undeniably different. Not a brand new life, just a different way of treating yourself in the same life. When you slip, and you will, the old pattern will tell you, see, it's happening again. This year is ruined. You failed already. Start over next year. That mindset is how you rack up failure years, by throwing away the year every time you're not perfect. Next year can be the one where you stop restarting. You don't start over. You resume. You don't destroy the whole plan because one day was bad. You adjust the plan around the fact that bad days exist. Christmas is the emotional year-end, the time where everything in you decides whether to write the whole year off as wasted or not. You can honor your disappointment without drowning in it. I am unhappy with how this year went. I wanted more. I was capable of more in some areas and I didn't give it. I made choices I regret. I wasted time. I hurt myself. I hurt others. And also, I carried things nobody knows about. I stayed alive on days when that was not an easy decision. I learned about my limits. I learned about my pain. I am here now, not finished. Failure years are not blank. They are overloaded with lessons you didn't ask for. You don't have to be grateful for them, but you can stop pretending that all they prove is that you're useless. This Christmas, when you feel the knot in your stomach about the coming year, you don't have to promise yourself a miracle. You can promise yourself this instead. I will not make my worth depend on my January enthusiasm and my December results. I will not call myself a failure for being human. I will not ignore my fear. I will listen to it and then choose smaller, kinder, more realistic steps that future me might actually be able to keep. The fear of another failure year is real, but the idea of a failure year is a story, not a fact. A story you tell yourself about 12 months of chaos, effort, avoidance, survival, and small sparks of growth. You can't rewrite this year. You can write a different story about the next one. Not, I will not fail, but when I fail, and I will not use it as a weapon against myself. I will use it as a reason to adjust, not to abandon. That alone, lived honestly, would make next year different. And for someone who feels like they can't take another year like this, different is a much more powerful word than perfect. The fear of another failure year.